I still remember the first time I walked into Maple Street Diner. I was 23, newly married, and so poor I was counting out nickels for gas. It was one of those sticky Tennessee summers where the air feels like it's hugging you a little too tight, and my old Corolla's air conditioner had given up the ghost sometime around May. Maple Street sat right on the corner of Main and 4th, squat and square, wrapped in shiny chrome that caught the afternoon sun. Big front windows were always fogged up just a little from the griddles and coffee makers inside. There was a neon sign in the window, breakfast all day, that flickered on and off like it had a mind of its own. When I opened the door that first time, a bell chimed overhead, and the smell just about knocked me flat. Bacon, coffee, biscuits, a hint of bleach from where somebody had just mopped. Emotion. Warm, that place smelled like comfort and hard work and Sunday mornings, all rolled into one. Sit anywhere you like, sugar, a voice called from behind the counter. That was Miss Ruby. 50-something back then, with salt and pepper hair piled up on her head, lipstick just a shade too bright, and a laugh that rolled out of her whole body. She owned the place, though she never called herself the owner. She always said, "I just keep the lights on and the grease hot. The diner belongs to the town." I slid into a booth by the window, stuck my elbows to the vinyl seat, and tried not to think about how many people had sat there before me. Pause, then the coffee landed in front of me, black and steaming, with a little clink of ceramic on Formica. And for the first time that week, I felt like I could breathe. That was almost 40 years ago. In between then and now, I grew up. I had my babies. I lost my husband. I gained grandbabies and laugh lines and a whole lot of stories. But Maple Street Diner was always there, like a little anchor holding this town, and me, steady, when everything else felt like it was drifting. So when I tell you the day the sign went up, closing soon, thank you for 52 years, felt like a funeral notice. I'm not exaggerating. It was a Tuesday morning when I saw it. I only remember because Tuesdays were our pancake and gossip days. Me and my best friend Loretta met at the diner every Tuesday at 8 sharp, come rain, shine, or grandbaby birthdays. "June, if you're late again, I'm ordering your biscuits myself," Loretta had said on the phone. I'd laughed, thrown on my softest blue cardigan, and driven down Maple like I had 100 times before. The same pothole on the corner, the same dog asleep on old Mr. Henry's porch, the same church sign with some punny scripture about needing to pray more. But when I pulled into the diner parking lot, my heart dropped straight into my shoes. The windows still had those little lace curtains. The neon sign still flickered. But in the center of the glass door, crooked and taped like it had been done in a hurry, was that white paper with big black letters. "Closing soon, thank you for 52 years. My first thought was that it had to be a joke. Some kind of prank. Maybe their printer had malfunctioned and spit out something from the future instead of the menu. I actually laughed out loud in my car, this weak little sound that died before it got past the steering wheel. Then I saw the second line, printed smaller, right underneath. Last day of business November 30, that was 3 weeks away. I sat there with my hand on the door handle, air not really making it down into my lungs, watching my breath fog up the windshield, even though the car was off. The bell over the door jingled, and Loretta stepped out, squinting at my car. She had her big leopard print purse on her shoulder, and her gray hair teased so high it added 3 inches to her height. "Well, are you comin' in, or you just gonna live in that Corolla now?" she called. I pushed the door open fast and stepped out, pointing at the sign like it might bite me. "Loretta, do you see this?" She turned, read it, and went very, very still. Loretta is not the still type. Even when she's quiet, Something's always moving her foot, her hand, the corner of her mouth. But right then, she froze. No, she said, like she could argue with the paper and make it untrue. Nope, absolutely not. Somebody made that on one of them fake sign websites. It's taped to the door, I said. I don't think it's a meme. Loretta pressed her lips together, squared her shoulders, and marched inside like she was going to file a formal complaint with God. I followed her, my chest tight. Bell chimed. The smell of coffee washed over us, and for a moment, it really did feel like any other Tuesday. Somebody laughed over in the corner. The radio near the kitchen played some old country song about cheatin' and trucks. The griddle hissed, but then my eyes landed on Miss Ruby behind the counter. She was still in her usual uniform, light blue waitress dress, white apron, name tag with Ruby in red letters, and she was still pouring coffee into a farmer's mug, but her shoulders drooped in a way I hadn't seen before. There were dark circles under her eyes deep enough to hide secrets in. She looked up, saw us, and for half a second, her smile came easy and bright, like it always had. Then she saw our faces, and it faltered. "Oh, June, Loretta," she said softly. "Y'all saw it." "Tell me this is some kind of early April Fools," Loretta blurted. "Tell me you hit print on the wrong file. Tell me you got hacked." Ruby set the coffee pot down very carefully, like it was suddenly heavy. She wiped her hands on her apron, even though they were already clean. "I wish I could, baby," she said. "I truly do." We slid into our usual booth, the one by the window where you could see half the town drive by if you stayed long enough. The vinyl seat creaked under me in that familiar way, like it knew the shape of my hips after all these years. Ruby came over with coffee before we even had to ask. She poured, then just stood there for a moment, holding the pot with both hands, staring at the steam. "Ruby," I said gently, "what's going on?" She took a breath that sounded like it hurt. "Well," she said, "long story short, I'm tired, the bank isn't, and my landlord doesn't care either way." "Start at the beginning," Loretta said, crossing her arms. "And don't leave out the parts where we can yell at somebody." Ruby laughed, but it was a small, worn-out sound. "You know how slow it's been," she said, nodding toward the half-empty diner. "Ever since that big chain place opened out by the interstate, folks go there 'cause the menus light up and the kids get crayons. Then the pandemic hit, and we barely made it through. I took out a loan just to keep the doors open." She looked down at the pot. "I figured things would pick up, but groceries went up, electricity went up, gas went up. Only thing that didn't go up was our prices, 'cause I just couldn't do it to people." I thought of all the times she'd slipped extra bacon on my plate when I looked tired, or topped off my coffee, and waved away my wallet when she knew my paycheck was late. "I got behind on the rent for the building," she went on. "I thought I could catch up once the summer crowd came through." She shook her head. "They didn't." "What about the bank?" I asked. "Can't they work with you?" Ruby's mouth tightened. "Bank says I'm what they call high risk now." She made air quotes with one hand, her bracelets jingling. "Landlord says he's already got somebody interested in the space. Some kind of frozen yogurt franchise. Says it'll update the block." Loretta made a noise like she'd swallowed a lemon. "Update the block. Lord have mercy." "So," Ruby said, her eyes shining just a little, "I set a date. Told the staff. Put up the sign. And that's that." She tried to smile. 52 years is a good run. Daddy opened this place in 71. Said if it lasted 5 years, he'd consider it a miracle. I suppose I got a lot of extra miracles. I stared at her. This woman had fed me through every stage of my life. She de-slipped a milkshake to my youngest when she got her heart broken in 10th grade. She de-told my husband, God rest him, that if he didn't start treating me better, she'd pour hot coffee in his lap. She'd let us push 2 tables together when we needed room for the whole choir. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Couple weeks," she said. "Didn't want to say anything till I had to. Figured folks had enough to worry about without me adding to the load." "Ruby," I whispered, "we're part of that, folks." She blinked hard, then reached out and patted my hand. Her palm was warm and smelled faintly of dish soap. "I know, sweetheart," she said. "I do." "And you didn't think we'd want to help?" Loretta demanded. Ruby gave her a tired look I'd seen on my own face in the bathroom mirror some mornings. "Help how, Loretta? Y'all already tip more than you oughta. I see you countin' your dollars before you come in." I wasn't about to ask the people who kept me open this long to dig even deeper. Loretta huffed, grabbed the sugar caddy, then put it back down with more force than necessary. "It ain't over," she muttered. "Not if I have anything to say about it." I just sat there, hands wrapped around my mug, listening to the clink of plates and the low hum of conversation, trying to imagine this room dark and empty. The thought felt wrong, like picturing the church without a steeple or Christmas without music. For the first time in a long time, I had no idea what to say. The rest of that morning went by in a blur of refills and half-finished sentences. People came in, saw the sign, and reacted in all the ways you'd expect. Some got quiet, some got mad. Old Mr. Jenkins, who'd eaten the same scrambled eggs and dry wheat toast every morning since Reagan was in office, just sat at the counter and cried into his coffee. On my way out, I hugged Ruby harder than usual. She smelled like coffee and cinnamon, and that cheap floral perfume she'd worn since before I met her. "If you need anything," I said, "and I mean anything, you call me." "I know you mean it, June," she said. "That helps more than you think." But as I walked to my car, my shoes crunching on loose gravel, I knew "call me if you need anything" wasn't going to cut it this time. This wasn't a bad day. This was the end of an era, and I wasn't sure I was ready to let that happen without at least putting up a fight. I didn't sleep much that night. I lay in bed, listening to the old house creak around me, the ceiling fan ticking like a metronome, keeping time with my thoughts, as the glow from the streetlight outside slipped through the blinds, painting lines across my bedroom ceiling. Every memory I had of Maple Street Diner seemed to decide it was the perfect time to play in my head like a slideshow. Me, 8 months pregnant and swollen, trying to wedge myself into a booth, while Ruby fussed that I should have called, and she would have brought food to the car. My kids, little and sticky, fighting over who got the seat by the window. My husband coming home from his night shift at the factory, sliding into the seat across from me with worry in his eyes, and Ruby refilling his coffee before he even asked. And then, later, me, sitting alone in that same booth after the divorce papers were signed, staring at an untouched plate of pancakes, while Ruby sat across from me, held my hand, and said, "Baby, sometimes the trash takes itself out." That diner had held my life in its 4 walls like a scrapbook you could walk into. "Lord," I whispered into the dark, "I know it's just a building. I know there's bigger things to worry about. But if there's any way to keep those doors open," I didn't even know what I was asking for. Money raining from the sky. A rich stranger wandering through town with a soft spot for chrome. The next morning, I did what any Southern woman does when she's got feelings she doesn't know what to do with. I baked. By 9 a.m., my kitchen smelled like sugar and butter and regret. There were 2 pecan pies cooling on the counter, a banana bread in the oven, and flour on parts of me that ought never see flour. Emotion. Rye, the phone rang around the time I was scraping batter off the mixer. "You seen what I'm seeing on Facebook?" Loretta asked. No hello, just straight to business. "I try not to look at what I'm seeing on Facebook," I said, tucking the phone between my ear and shoulder. "Last time I did, I found out Tammy Joe's dog has more followers than I do. Girl, I'm serious, she said. Go look at the town page. Now, I rinsed my hands, wiped them on a dish towel, and shuffled into the living room to grab my laptop. My knees popped in protest. These joints did not sign up for emergency scrolling, I muttered. On the Maple Ridge community board, our little corner of internet drama and lost dog posts, was a photo of the diner door, sign and all. Underneath, the caption read, Maple Street Diner is closing after 52 years. This place has been part of our lives. Share your favorite memory. There were already dozens of comments. First date with my husband, 1984. He spilled coffee in his lap, and I married him anyway. Ruby gave us free pie when my mom lost her job. Never forgot that. My granddaddy ate there every Sunday after church. They kept his usual going for a year after he passed just to honor him. Pictures, too. Kids with whipped cream on their noses. Birthday candles stuck in pancakes. A blurry shot of the high school football team crowded into 3 booths after winning state. I scrolled and scrolled, tears starting to blur the screen. Emotion. Sad seeing it, Loretta asked. I'm seeing it, I whispered. That place ain't just a restaurant, she said. It's a memory warehouse. I laughed wetly. That's one way to put it. And I'm telling you right now, I'm not drinking corporate coffee in some yogurt-smelling chain for the rest of my natural life. We'll stage a sit-in with my walker if I have to. We're not that old, I said automatically. My knees disagree, she replied. Emotion. Warm, there was a pause. Not the dramatic kind, just the soft kind where both of you are thinking the same thing and waiting to see who'll say it first. What if, I started. Yep, she said. You don't even know what I was about to say. You were about to say, what if we do something? And I'm saying, yep, I sighed. We're 2 retired ladies with more recipes than savings. What exactly are we going to do about a bank loan and a landlord with frozen yogurt dreams? Maybe nothing, she said. Maybe something. But we sure can't do a dang thing if we sit at home making banana bread and crying into our aprons. I looked down at the flower on my shirt. You've been peeking in my windows. Town meeting, she said. Tonight, 7 o'clock, church hall. I already called Pastor Tim. I told him it was urgent. You told him the diner closing was urgent. June, that man has eaten more biscuits than communion wafers over there. He understands the stakes. I snorted. You think anybody'll come? You seen that Facebook post? She asked. Trust me, people are gonna come. They just need somebody bossy to tell them where and when. I shook my head, but my heart gave this little hopeful flip. Emotion, hopeful, okay, I said. Town meeting. Tonight. Wear that blue sweater, she added. The one that makes you look less like you've been arguing with your oven. I have been arguing with my oven. And you lost, by the sound of it. See ya at 7. By 6:30 that evening, the church fellowship hall was already half full. Folding chairs clattered as people set them up in uneven rows. The smell of coffee and store-bought cookies mixed with the faint scent of old hymnals and pine sol. The overhead fluorescent lights hummed like they had opinions. I stood off to the side, clutching a stack of index cards like they were a shield. I'd never led a town meeting before. I'd led PTA bake sales, sure. I'd organized meal trains and choir practices. But this felt bigger. Loretta bustled up beside me, arms full of paperwork. I printed out some statistics, she said. Apparently downtown diners bring character and economic stability to communities. I highlighted the bits I understood. I peeked at the paper. Half the words looked like they'd taken a wrong turn out of a city council meeting. Loretta, you know good and well no one's listening to statistics when their hearts are breaking, I said. She sighed. Fine, you do the feelings. I'll be back up. People kept trickling in. Mr. Jenkins shuffled to a seat in the front with his cane. A couple of teenagers from the high school volleyball team sat together, still in their practice jerseys, whispering. Pastor Tim stood by the coffee urn, refilling cups and patting shoulders like we were at a potluck for grief. At 5 minutes to 7, the door opened, and Miss Ruby walked in. She de-changed out of her uniform, but not by much. She wore a faded floral blouse and dark slacks, her hair pulled back with a tortoiseshell clip. She looked smaller, like some of the air had leaked out of her. When people saw her, the room quieted all on its own. Conversations tapered off, like someone had turned down the volume knob on the whole town. "Lord, I feel like I walked into my own wake," Ruby muttered, trying to joke. "Sit up front," Loretta called. "You're the guest of honor." Ruby rolled her eyes, but she sat. I watched her with that same ache in my chest from the diner. This woman had held up so many of us for so long. Seeing her need holding for a change felt wrong and right at the same time. Pastor Tim cleared his throat. "All right," he said. "We're here because apparently God and the bank did not consult us before making decisions about Maple Street Diner." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the room. "I'm going to open us with a quick prayer," he said. "And then I'm going to let June and Loretta take the floor, because I've learned when those two get going, the spirit moves faster than I do." Heads bowed. People murmured amen in the right places. I mostly prayed not to pass out. When he finished, he gestured for me to come up. My knees wobbled all the way to the front. I set my index cards on the podium, looked out at all those faces, lined, young, familiar, worried, and felt something in me settle. These were my people. "Evenin', y'all," I said. "Most of you know me. I'm June. I've lived here my whole life, and I've eaten more hash browns at Maple Street Diner than I care to admit in polite company." A little ripple of chuckles. Good. They were listening. "I'm not here as some kind of business expert," I went on. "I don't know much about balance sheets or franchise rights, but I do know what that little chrome building S meant to this town." I glanced at Ruby. She was staring at her hands, eyes shiny. "I know it's where some of y'all had your first dates," I said. "Where you went after funerals because grief is easier to carry with a plate of fried chicken in front of you. Where you got coffee at 6 a.m. before your shift and at 10 p.m. after your shift." Heads nodded. Mr. Jenkins dabbed his eyes with a handkerchief. "I know some of you got free meals when you couldn't afford it, 'cause Ruby decided your pride was more important than her profit margin that day." A few people laughed through their tears. Ruby looked up, shaking her head as if to deny it, but she knew we knew. "And now," I said, "because of things that feel too big for one-person banks, rent, rising costs, we're being told that door is closing. For good." The words sat heavy in the room. Pause. "I don't know if we can change that," I admitted, "but I do know we haven't even tried yet. And I, for one, am not ready to look back and say we just watched it happen." I took a breath. "So let's talk," I said. "Let's share what that place means, and then let's see if there's anything we can do. And if the answer is still no, then at least we'll know we fought for something worth fighting for." Loretta came up then with her highlighted statistics, bless her heart, and talked about small business grants and community funds and how diners like Maple Street made downtowns more than just streets. Some of it went over folks' heads. Some of it went over mine. But underneath the numbers was one clear message: this place matters. Then something beautiful happened. People started standing up, not in some organized, I have the floor way, just one at a time, when they couldn't hold their stories in anymore. The high school volleyball coach talked about taking the girls for milkshakes after wins and losses, and how Ruby always gave them a discount because future champions gotta eat. A young mom shared how, when her husband was deployed, the diner staff would put a candle in her son's pancake every time they came in. just so he'd have something to look forward to. Old Mr. Jenkins cleared his throat and said, "When my Martha died, I couldn't cook worth a lick. Ruby kept me alive that first year. She put extra butter on my toast and never once mentioned that I wore the same shirt 3 days in a row." Ruby finally spoke then, her voice shaky. "Y'all are gonna make me cry my mascara clean off," she said. Emotional, somewhere in there, the energy in the room shifted. What had started as grief became determination. Ideas flew like popcorn in a hot pan. Could we do a fundraiser? What about a GoFundMe? I've got connections at the bank. Maybe we could renegotiate the loan. Could the town buy the building and lease it back cheap? Pastor Tim scratched his head. "We can't exactly pass the plate for commercial real estate," he said, "but I'm hearing a lot of faith in this room." Through it all, Ruby just sat there, listening, her hands clasped. Every now and then, she'd shake her head and murmur, "Y'all don't have to do all this." But you could tell it was already too late. The town had decided have to didn't matter. By the time the meeting broke up, we didn't have a full plan. We did, however, have a committee, which somehow meant me, Loretta, and Pastor Tim. A list of people willing to call the bank, the landlord, and anyone who'd ever eaten a good biscuit. A date for Save Our Diner weekend with special events. And maybe most importantly, we had hope. As folks filed out, Ruby came up to me, eyes red but shining. "June," she said, I never meant for all this." I put my hands on her shoulders. "Baby," I said, "you spent 50+ years taking care of everybody else. You really thought we were gonna sit on our hands while somebody put a closed sign on your life's work?" She laughed, then pressed a paper napkin to her face. "I don't know if it'll work," she whispered. "There," I admitted, "but we're gonna try." The next few days felt like stepping into some kind of small-town movie, only with more back pain and less dramatic lighting. Emotion. The Maple Ridge Community Board exploded. Someone slapped together a Save Maple Street Diner page, and before long, it had more likes than the high school football team, which was a miracle in itself. People posted old photos, shared memories, and started asking one question over and over. "What can I do?" We gave them answers. Loretta's granddaughter set up an online fundraiser with a goal that made me a little queasy when I saw it. $150,000. Enough to catch up on the building rent, pay off a chunk of the bank loan, and make some much-needed repairs. "We'll never reach that," Ruby said when I showed her. "Maybe not," I said, "but we'll get closer than zero." The mayor agreed to waive certain fees if the diner stayed open another year. The local printer donated flyers. The high school art club painted a big banner that said "Keep Maple Street, COOKIN," with cartoon pancakes and coffee cups. Our Save Our Diner weekend turned into a full-blown festival. We had live music in the parking lot, kids' games on the side street, and raffles for everything from haircuts to oil changes, all donated by local businesses. On Saturday morning, I stood behind a table selling homemade pies with Loretta, my back already screaming, and my heart so full I thought it might crack. Emotion. Warm people lined up around the block to eat at the diner one more time, or as we hoped, one more time for now. Folks who'd moved away drove in from the city. College kids home for the weekend dragged their sleepy selves out of bed for biscuits and gravy. There was laughter everywhere, but this soft thread of anxiety ran under it. We all knew this might still be a goodbye. Sometime around noon, I spotted a man in a suit stepping out of a dark sedan across the street. He was younger than me, maybe early 40s, with a sharp haircut and a leather briefcase. He looked out of place, like the word festival didn't usually appear in his calendar. "Bank," Loretta muttered beside me. "Gotta be." "Or landlord," I said. "Either way, I don't like his tie." We watched as he crossed the street and walked into the diner. My stomach twisted. "I'm gonna go in," I said. "You want backup?" "No," I said, then reconsidered. "Yes, but stay back far enough that if I say something stupid, you can pretend you don't know me." She snorted. That ship sailed in 92. Inside, the diner was packed. Every booth was full, counter stools occupied, the air buzzing with conversation and the clatter of plates. Ruby was at the register, hair frizzing at the edges, apron stained, handing change to teenage boy. A suited man stood a little off to the side, waiting. His eyes scanned the room like he was taking inventory. When his gaze passed over me, something flickered: surprise, recognition. I couldn't tell. Ruby finished with the boy and turned to him, smoothing her apron. "Hi there," she said. "We're a little busy right now, but if you're looking for a table, I can put you down." "That's not necessary," he said. His voice was calm, measured. "Miss Ruby, is it?" She nodded slowly. "I'm Andrew Keller," he said, holding out his hand. "From First County Bank." Loretta, who had drifted in behind me, muttered, "Knew it." Ruby's shoulders tensed just a bit. "We've spoken on the phone," she said, shaking his hand. "Yes," he said. He glanced around again. "I wanted to see the place in person." "Well," Ruby said, "now you have." He cleared his throat. "Could we talk somewhere quieter?" She looked over his shoulder at the packed room, then at me. Her eyes asked a question I didn't quite know how to answer. "I can cover the register for a minute," I said. "You sure?" "Baby, I've watched you ring people up since, before debit cards existed. I can handle a few cash sales." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right. Table 7, Andrew. It's the only one that doesn't squeak when you sit down." He smiled faintly and followed her to a booth near the back. Slid behind the register, my heart pounding like I'd just been handed the nuclear codes. That was the longest 15 minutes of my life. I watched them talk, their heads bent close together over a manila folder. Ruby's hands moved a lot, Andrew's didn't. Every now and then, he'd look up, scanning the room again, eyes catching on the banner outside the front window, the Save Our Diner posters taped up everywhere. A couple of times, Ruby rubbed at her eyes with the heel of her hand. Once, she laughed. Once, she shook her head hard enough that her earrings swung. Finally, they stood. Andrew said something, extended his hand again. Ruby took it. Her expression was unreadable, not devastated, not exactly joyful, just stunned. She walked back toward the counter slowly, like someone whose legs weren't entirely sure what they were doing. Andrew headed for the door, then paused, turned, and caught my eye. "Miss June," he said. I blinked. "Do I know you?" "Not really," he said, "but I know of you. My mama used to work third shift at the factory. She said you brought casseroles every time somebody's husband got laid off." I stared. "Your mama is Patty Keller," he said. "She moved to Knoxville a while back." "Oh, Lord," I said, putting a hand to my chest. "Little Andy Keller, with the freckles and the bowl cut," he grimaced. I had hoped that particular haircut had been erased from the record. I laughed, the tension in my shoulders easing just a little. "She also said," he went on, "that this place made sure she and I had hot meals when we couldn't afford much more than ramen. Said Miss Ruby always slipped her extra bacon and told her not to tell anyone." "That sounds like her," I said. He nodded. "I wanted to see it for myself before I signed off on anything." "Signed off," I repeated. He glanced at Ruby, who had reached the counter now, her cheeks damp. "Miss Ruby can explain," he said, "but for now, keep doing what you're doing." He gave a little nod to both of us and left, the bell jingling behind him. I turned to Ruby slowly. "Well," she took a deep breath, laughed once, and grabbed a napkin to blow her nose. "Well," she said, "apparently the bank has what they call discretion. And apparently that boy remembers how this place kept him and his mama fed." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," she said, eyes filling again, "they're restructuring the loan. lower payments, longer timeline, and a 3-month grace period to get caught up. No foreclosure, no collection calls, no auctioning off the stainless steel. My knees went weak. I grabbed the edge of the counter. Emotion, shocked, and the landlord, I asked. He's still a problem, she said. Frozen yogurt hasn't melted yet. But Andrew says if we show good faith and can put together a partial lump sum for back rent, he thinks we can negotiate. How big a lump? She named a number. It was big, but not impossible. Not with the fundraiser, the festival, the online campaign. How much we got so far? I asked. Ruby pointed at a donation jar on the counter, stuffed with bills and checks, and even a couple of crumpled IOUs. Between that and the online thing, she said, we're over halfway. Halfway, I repeated. She nodded. Her eyes were wide and bright. June, we might actually do this. For the first time since that sign went up, I let myself imagine the diner still here, next year, the year after. New kids pressing their noses to the glass. Old-timers arguing about baseball at the counter. Ruby still fussing about the coffee filters. It felt like sunlight breaking through after a long storm. Emotion. Hopeful Loretta barreled up then, out of breath. I missed something, did I? Yes, I said, but in a good way, we told her. She whooped so loud 3 people at the near table jumped. See, she said, smacking my arm. I told you we weren't done yet. The weeks that followed weren't magic. They were hard, emotion, reflective. We still had to hustle. Fundraisers didn't run themselves. I learned more about online payment processors than any 60-something woman should have to know. We organized a silent auction. We called old friends and begged for donations. Cornered the mayor so many times I started to worry he'd take a different route to work. The landlord, Mr. Peterson, turned out to be less of a villain and more of a man who'd been staring at spreadsheets too long. I've got offers, he told us in yet another meeting. Corporate offers, guaranteed leases. So you'd rather rent to a yogurt chain than to the woman who's paid you rent for 27 years, Loretta demanded. He sighed. It's not personal. That's the problem, I said quietly. It should be at least a little personal. This isn't just square footage. It's Maple Street Diner. We showed him the fundraiser numbers. We showed him the signatures on the petition. We showed him the letter Pastor Tim had drafted about community impact. We didn't guilt him, not exactly. We just laid the truth out there and let him sit with it. In the end, numbers got us part of the way there. But I think it was something else that tipped him over. One afternoon, he came into the diner to talk. It was between rushes, the lull where the sunlight hits the chrome just right and dust motes dance in the air. Ruby poured him coffee without asking. You know, he said, staring into the mug, my parents brought me here after my Little League games. Ruby smiled. Your mama used to sneak you extra fries. He nodded. I remember. I also remember my dad saying this place was the only one in town that never made him feel like he didn't belong. There was a long pause. I can't give you forever, he said finally, but I can give you 5 years at the current rate if you cover the back rent. After that, we'll reassess. Ruby exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for months. 5 years, she said. I can work with 5 years. We shook on it. When the online fundraiser hit its goal, thanks in part to some big anonymous donor, I still suspect was little Andy Keller. The town page lit up like Christmas. People posted gifs of dancing pancakes. The high school band marched down Maple Street on a random Thursday just to play We Are the Champions in front of the diner. On December 1st, the day after the original closing date, Ruby taped a new sign to the door. Staying open, thank you. Maple Ridge people took photos with it like it was a tourist attraction. That morning, Pastor Tim came in, sat at the counter, and ordered his usual. Well, he said, stirring cream into his coffee. Guess God and the bank did consult us after all, Ruby laughed. Or maybe God just used the bank, he nodded. That's how he gets you. I sat in my usual booth, watching sunlight stream through the windows, listening to the clink of silverware, the murmur of voices, the hiss of the griddle. It all sounded exactly the same as it had for decades, but it felt different. It felt chosen, saved, held. I caught Ruby's eye through the morning rush. She mouthed, "Thank you." I shook my head. It wasn't me. It wasn't any one person. It was all of us, together. Years have passed since then. My grandbabies are taller. My hair is whiter. My knees complain louder when I slide into that booth. But Maple Street Diner is still there, stubborn and shining on the corner of Main and 4th. Some mornings when I push open that door and hear the bell jingle, I get this wave of gratitude so strong it makes my eyes sting. Not just because the coffee is still hot and the bacon is still crisp, because we, as a town, decided it mattered enough to fight for. You know, people talk about progress like it's a bulldozer that can't be stopped. New franchises, new developments, new things that are good for business. And some of that is true. I like my online shopping and my fancy coffee shop just fine. But I've learned something watching that little diner survive. Progress that steamrolls people's hearts isn't progress. It's just movement for its own sake. What we did wasn't about resisting change. It was about choosing which stories we wanted to keep telling. Because that's what places like Maple Street really are, stories made of chrome and counter stools and coffee stains. They're the backdrop to our lives. The setting for first dates, hard conversations, quiet mornings, loud celebrations. When you lose a place like that, you don't just lose somewhere to eat. You lose a chapter in your town's book. And sometimes, if you're lucky, your town decides to pick up a pen and write a different ending. No, I've been thinking a lot lately about houses and diners, and all the places we tuck our hearts into. A house is more than walls and a roof. It's where you stack your memories, Christmas mornings, slammed doors, burnt casseroles, late-night laughs. Over time, the paint peels and the floor creaks, but you keep patching and sweeping because it's home. You don't throw it away just because something newer pops up down the road. That diner is like a second house for this town. Its walls have soaked up more joy and sorrow than most living rooms. And just like an old family home, it needed work. The foundation, those bank notes and lease agreements started to crack. For a while, it looked easier to bulldoze it and build something shiny and forgettable. But love doesn't always take the easy road. When a family decides to fix up grandma's old place instead of selling it, they're not just saving lumber. They're honoring the people who sat at that kitchen table, who prayed over that stove, who danced in that living room when nobody was watching. That's what we did with Maple Street. We saw past the chipped formica and the outdated neon. We saw the birthdays and grief meals and first cups of coffee after long nights. We realized the diner wasn't finished with us yet, and we weren't finished with it. So we rolled up our sleeves. We made calls, baked pies, passed jars, told stories. We became, for a little while, less like neighbors and more like family renovating a house we all shared. And maybe that's the real lesson tucked inside all this. You can't save every place, and you can't fix every broken thing. But when something has held your heart, your history, your people, you owe it at least a try. In the end, a town isn't defined by its newest building or biggest store. It's defined by what it refuses to let go of, by the porches and pews and diners it chooses to keep, even when it'd be easier not to. So next time you sit at a wobbly table in a place that knows your order by heart, take a good look around. That's more than a meal in front of you. That's a little piece of home you share with everyone else lucky enough to sit there. And some things, sugar, are worth stepping in for with both feet and your whole heart.